All right. Hope everybody's having a good weekend. Again, the media landscape right now is pretty dry. So I'm catching up on the member requests for this month. I watched ga-rei-zero yesterday. Got my Hunter x Hunter full series video out this week. I watched the first 3 episodes of Macross, which is a very old school anime. Although I did enjoy the first 3 episodes before I watched the movie. After this stream, I'm going to watch it. It's pretty funny seeing the older animation style, because in a way, even though it's anime, because it's so much less stylized, I feel like the characters actually look more like humans, which I'm sure sounds, ridiculous. But yeah, so that's kind of what I've been doing this weekend. Having a good laugh at Captain America 4 and enjoying the Cope online. It's so funny watching these shills try to justify just these absolute dog shit shows. Like, it's just hilarious because anybody who's paying attention just sees through it, obviously. Sorry about that. And then, that doesn't even get into once you start looking into it more and you can see, the ridiculous box office claims and just the straight up lying about the budget, obviously. It's just funny to watch. Because the MCU, I don't really talk about as much. But it is not in a great state either. Now, it's a lot more recent, obviously. And because there's been, 40 movies or whatever, when you're comparing it to something like Star Wars, which has 11, I guess 12 if you want to throw the Clone Wars in. It has a lot more room for bad movies. But I think what I find funny about it is it's just been steadily bad. Like, it's not like one of those things where, kind of like how with Star Wars, right? You had the first 7 movies. Well, I guess 8, because Rogue One was also generally well received. I think largely due to the Darth Vader scene at the end. But, you had 8 movies that the first 3 were obviously what made Star Wars what it is. The prequels were at least well received by kids, and they were seen by a lot of people. Even if, at the time, people were kind of like dunking on them. But, then you had Force Awakens, which that's one I wish I had a YouTube channel for at the time, because I remember walking out of the theater just feeling like hollow. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, I just felt like, everyone was talking so much about it, about how good it was. And I just remember thinking, like, it was fine, but I didn't feel anything emotionally because it felt like such a ripoff of itself. So if I had a YouTube channel at the time, that definitely would have been one where I would probably be more critical than most people when everyone was just fucking sucking it off. Obviously, it made $2 billion. So that would have been fun to deal with at the time, you know. Anyway, so it was well received at the time, at least, right? And you do have to wonder if Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker hadn't been such a obvious piece of shit, if Force Awakens would still have a decent reputation. My guess is that it would, because I don't think people like. I mean, I think even now it has a decent reputation, especially compared to the other two. But anyway, but with Star Wars, the drop off was like the visceral hatred for it, I guess, was so sudden. Oh shit! I was wondering where that fucking guy was shooting me from. It was so sudden compared to what we're seeing with the MCU. Where the MCU, it's like, you know, the movies were overall good enough that it had goodwill. They were still obviously making money. The budgets were big, but still manageable at, you know, before. And then pretty much I think Endgame is sort of where it started to lose people. Like, obviously financially, Endgame is the highest grossing movie ever. I think Avatar did some gay ass re-release to edge it out, to take the lead back. Even though I don't even know if people could tell you the fucking main characters' names in Avatar. I don't think I can. I know it's Sam Worthington and Zoe Saldana. Anyway, but and then after Endgame, it seems like people have just been slowly kind of hopping off the train at each station. And there's been flashpoints of like, wow, the MCU is kind of bad now. And this Captain America movie, I think, is one of those. I'm not going to go crazy autistic with the numbers just because so many other people do it already. And I'm not going to. I mean, I like to talk about it because it's interesting, but I don't care enough to look up the box office every single day and do constant updates and that whole thing. But we know essentially the entire movie was reshot. But even if you were to give the benefit of the doubt about this $180 million budget, which is just not true, it's probably closer to fucking $400 million, really. And they've talked about having months of reshoots over and over. There's been like half a dozen fucking cuts because they keep reshooting shit. You know, all the same shit that's been massive management issues for the MCU. Just seems like it was ramped up to the highest degree in this one. And so pretty much like the movie, at least as far as making money, had no chance. But, you know, if it had done well at the box office, even if this one doesn't make money, it could have still been good for the brand. But it didn't even make more money than the other Captain America movies. I think out of the 4, this was like the second highest opening weekend. And that's not accounting for inflation or anything, which is pathetic, obviously. So it's just a disaster for them. And it's just funny to see people like defending this movie. Because there's just a certain faction of the audience that just by throwing the Marvel label on there, will defend it to the death. And I don't know, you go on, you know, the subreddits where they're all doing like the "it's not that bad actually" type thing. And it's like, if that's your defense for a movie, like, what does that say about the movie? Like, you can't even defend it as good. But, I mean, who the fuck could? It's a terrible movie with so many world building issues and just non-characters. Anyway, but even when the people who claim to like the movie are just doing the "it's actually not that bad" thing, it just reminds me of the Halo TV show. and you see all the cope around that. That shit's coming back to Netflix or coming onto Netflix, by the way. So if for some godforsaken reason you're interested in watching that show but didn't have Paramount, it'll be available. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. You know, I wouldn't subject my fucking worst enemies to watching that show. It's one of the most horrible, just cringe things I've ever seen. But yeah, I just laughing at the box office for Captain America really amused me, because not only did the opening weekend not do well, it it had an 82% drop off from last weekend. 82%. That is crazy. You know, the standard Marvel movie, you're looking usually at like 65, 70, because people want to get out and see it. They want to see the the post credit scenes, and if there's any cameos, they don't want to be spoiled. I think with a more standard movie, you're hoping for like 50. But for the MCU, 65, 70 is pretty typical. But 82 is so bad. So essentially what that means to me is that there's a core fan base that will literally just go see every Marvel movie. And that pool is shrinking. Just given that, this opening weekend made like 20 million less than Ant-Man did domestically during its opening weekend. It's just fallen off a fucking cliff. And not only has that pool shrunk of the people who are just willing to see anything, the people who are interested in the word of mouth for Marvel movies in general is just bad. Like, obviously, if you had decent word of mouth, and this was more in the 60% drop off, 65 even for a Marvel movie, you could see, okay, maybe there's nothing else out. Maybe it'll do okay for a few weeks, right? But 82%, I mean, your audience just fucking vanished. Like the only people that wanted to see the movie did, and it doesn't seem like anyone fucking liked it. That's kind of the takeaway for the box office. And you really just have to wonder, why are people bitch about Kathleen Kennedy not getting fired for Star Wars? Why are heads not fucking rolling at Marvel? Well, in the Disney Marvel part of the company, whatever you want to call them. Like, it is just pathetic. And then, of course, if you're interested in people like Drinker and EFAP, they go into autistic detail and catch a bunch of shit that you probably don't even catch in the theater if you go see it in the theater. And everything that you notice just makes it worse and worse. Oh, damn. I don't know if it's fucking allergies or what. I mean, South Carolina, it's like 60s right now. So it's not like the weather's going some drastic change, but enough to be annoying at least. As far as what else I wanted to talk about today, Reacher Season 3 is probably the other thing. That's just such a fun show. And it's kind of crazy to me that there seems to be like a lot of people who just don't, like a lot of people in Hollywood who don't realize how simple the audience can be if you just appeal to their baser lizard brain. Like, Reacher is one of the simplest, most direct, just plain shows that I've seen in a while, I think. I'm trying to think of the last one I would even compare it to. But it's not crazy complex. Yeah, there's twists, but it's typical, spy movie shit where you're kind of suspecting the people involved anyway, or they just outright show you, even if Reacher doesn't know. And yeah, it's just violent. It's fun. It's always one of those things to me too with violence, where I find it interesting how, you can watch a Quentin Tarantino movie and just never be grossed out because the violence is just so outrageous that it becomes kind of comical. Like, it doesn't feel real in any meaningful way. And and with a show like Reacher, because it does feel quote unquote realistic, right? He's not a superhuman, but he obviously kills way more people than he should. He beats up 10 dudes at once. All the typical 80s, 90s action hero shit. And so the violence in that show feels visceral and like kind of hard to watch sometimes, even though it's not crazy over the top. Like, there's a lot of the like limb snapping and stuff. And that's one of those things that every time I watch it, I'm like, oh. And especially, I think if you've ever broken a bone yourself, you just that hearing like a bone snap like that, and you can kind of remember how it felt when you actually did it. Oh, it's just so gross to listen to. I think it was the first season where he was trying to stuff a bunch of bodies into a trunk. So he was breaking all of the limbs to make them fit. And it's just so disgusting to listen to. I'm trying to think of a movie that I would say is comparable in that regard to like the just sort of like down to earth but gritty, like it feels real type violence. I'll have to think of one. I mean, John Wick, to some degree, in the first couple does, where he's, doing similar shit, right? Where he's snapping limbs and like wrestling guys or stabbing them. Like the stabbing stuff, I think, is also gross a lot. To watch some guy just get, slowly stabbed to death over and over, like bleeding out. That's definitely another one of those that I'm like, kind of makes me cringe. I mean, it serves its purpose, obviously, but you know what I mean. Not cringe like the fucking Halo show or something, but in a more normal way. And yeah, it's just a very kind of basic bitch plot. Okay, what's up, Gonzalez? Yeah, so yes, at the beginning of the show, it does say it's based on the book Persuader. And yeah, the guy Paulie, I believe, is the giant you're referring to. He, I was wondering if they were doing like camera trickery with him. Apparently, fucking not. I guess the dude is just a massive dude, because I looked it up online before I made my video because I was curious. I was like, is this guy a big dude? And they gave him lifts or something, like obviously if you've seen Lord of the Rings, you've seen how they do forced perspective to make Gandalf look way taller than Bilbo and all that sort of thing. But no, the dude is 7'2". I can't remember what his weight was. I want to say 350 or something. I mean, he's a massive fucking dude. And yeah, it's crazy how big he is next to Alan Richardson. Because I think with Alan Richardson, they do some camera stuff to make him look a little bit taller than he is. Because in the books, I think Reacher's supposed to be like 6'5" ish, maybe 6'6". So he's always big, and then this guy dwarfs him. But yeah, Gonzalez says it's the only Reacher book that he's read, but it's a really good book. Yeah, and I'm a little bit surprised. I think I mentioned this in the video that they didn't make the decision at some point to just make the show set in the 80s. I mean, oh my god, I wasn't paying attention to my fuel there. Not because I have some nostalgia for the 80s or something. I wasn't even born yet. But you know, they do have to do a lot of accounting for cell phones and technology and all that type of shit. I think it works better this season, though. I don't know if you've watched the show or not. The first season I thought was pretty good. Like, I really enjoyed it. The second season I thought was a mess. And, you know, even with a show like this, you're not expecting highbrow, convoluted plots. But there is a level of retardation that's like just too much. And the second season was kind of at that point for me. And you know, if you want to go full retard and you get, you know, do a movie like Wanted, right? Where it's just people curving bullets and absolutely crazy shit. That I'm on board with. But when you like try to be serious, but not overly serious, but then you're just kind of retarded, I'm also just not a huge fan of that. So I think Reacher this season so far has been a good balance. Like where he's doing his thing, but it's not crazy complicated. It's not like too ridiculous. It's also not completely retarded to the point where you're like just checking out the mindless violence, you know. I think this season so far has worked much better than season 2 so far. I think Alan Richardson was a good casting. I do wonder. Jesus, I need to sneeze again. All right, well, it's not coming now that I said it. I do wonder how long he can keep it up. Because I don't know if you haven't seen the show, he is like ripped as shit. And they make a point to show him not in his clothes a lot. And, you know, I don't know if that's his choice or their choice or whatever. I made the joke in my video that he went to the director and was like, you better show me unclothed as much as possible because of all the work I'm putting in. Obviously, I have no idea whose choice it is. If he's pushing forward or the director or the story. But at this point, you know, if Reacher has been going on for 3 seasons, they probably started filming 4, 5, 6 years ago. You know, you have to wonder how long can he maintain the kind of shape that he's in the show. Because if you follow the Marvel stuff, you know, they all went through like something similar with the actors where, you know, eventually they just got tired of it because of, you know, as much as every person, like every guy I'm sure would love to look like Chris Hemsworth or even Chris Evans or whoever from the Marvel movies, right? I mean, even Paul Rudd was in really good shape. Chris Pratt was in good shape. Even if they don't have like the shredded 6-pack. But, you know, those guys, like when they talk about it, it's a lifestyle commitment, obviously. It's not like, you know, wrestling or MMA or something where you can manipulate your weight by getting dehydrated for a few days, and maybe you just don't eat for a couple of days and you kind of get to the weight you need to. They're going for a very specific look that, I mean, obviously it's completely fucking unnatural. I'm assuming that there's a lot of supplements, probably illegal and legal, involved. And, I'm sure their diets, their weight training, all of that shit is regimented to an insane degree. And then they have to, deliberately dehydrate them for when they film so they look more defined, and God knows what else they're doing to them. So I just wonder how long Alan Richardson can maintain that kind of shape. I mean, he's already in his 40s, right? And even if you're not, to live that way for a decade, unless that's your thing, I'm sure that's tough. Because that's not one of those things where it's like, oh, you can go out and party and have fun on the weekends and get back to it Monday. You need to fucking stop drinking. Like, you need to be in the gym 6-7 days a week. So it's a totally different mindset than just, a guy like a normal guy, like probably me, right? Who just wants to be like, oh, I just want to not be a giant fat fuck and, be in relatively decent shape, but I'm not going to take my shirt off and have airbrushed on abs in any world. Now, obviously, for the amount of money, I'm sure a lot of people would be willing to do it. But even still, I'm sure at some point it's like, okay, I've made money. The shit's getting made. I'm just over it. Gonzalez says he lost interest in season 2 by the second episode. It's hard to get back on board, but he'd recommend the novel. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I totally get that. What was it in season 2 that happened that pissed you off? Because I'll be honest, I don't remember. I remember just being kind of like meh on the whole thing. But there was definitely points where I'm like, oh, well, that's pretty fucking convenient, Like, there's a bunch of just stupidity. And then by the end, when he's grabbing onto a fucking helicopter and they've got rocket launchers they're shooting over fucking New York, and they're dangling from a helicopter fighting and holding on to a stretcher and whatever else. It just went way off the fucking rails for me. And maybe like a James Bond movie that works, right? But I don't feel like Reacher has that same tone. But from what I've listened to the people, I think it was Ryan Kinnell who has read the books. He hasn't read all of them because I heard there's like 30. But he's read quite a few of them. And I think he said this one has been pretty faithful so far. So I kind of wonder if they switched directors or something from season 1 to 2. And then after that, they were like, nah, like, your ass is fired, whoever did that fucking season. Because, I agree with you. Season 2 just kind of devolved into nonsense ass. And that was one that my wife and I both were like, man, I hope the show doesn't keep going this way. Because, you can deal with some like bad arcs or bad episodes or whatever the case is. But when the show just becomes that, you just kind of turn it off or tune out. I mean, this is what happened for me with Walking Dead, where it just became like, oh, like, what group of fucking cannibals are they going to run into this season? And then they were killing off all the people that you liked for shock value. And they eventually just ran out. So you ended up with a whole cast of people that you didn't give a shit about fighting another group of fucking cannibals. And it's like, at some point it becomes background noise, and then eventually you just stop watching altogether. And it's actually a shame because I read the graphic novels at the time for Walking Dead, and they were obviously very different from the show anyway. But I stopped watching during the Negan stuff for people who've watched that show. And then The Whisperers was the next arc that I never even got to. But in the graphic novel, they were fucking awesome. So I don't even know if they were good in the show or not, because I tuned out and everyone that I knew had stopped watching already. Let's see. Okay, so Gonzalez says, I think all the focus on the side characters and flashbacks and then quickly solving these problems that should be complex in seconds made it seem too campy. I was hoping it would double down on grit. Yeah, and that's what I was talking about. Like, there was a few times last season where they were like, oh, there's one point where they're like, oh, what's his password? And they literally just guess it. And it's supposed to be the guy who, obviously he's dead at the time, right? But it's supposed to be the guy who's like the security guy, hyper paranoid, had like an emergency backup mailbox and shit. I do remember that and thinking like, just like, what the hell are we doing here, So yeah, I definitely could see checking out pretty quickly. It's funny though that you checked out that fast because I actually don't remember being annoyed that quickly. I think for me it was more like the midway point where I was like, okay, like this season's just not as good. Because I usually, it might be one of those things too where I'm just stupid at this point. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me a bazillion times, shame on me. But there is like an element for me of like, when something is so bad, I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it a chance because, it might be deliberate. Like it's that bad that they might have done that on purpose as some kind of thing to set up later or a red herring or whatever. Yeah, Gonzalez says the password guess just triggered him. What's funny is I actually remember that being later in the show, but maybe you're right. I haven't gone back to watch it. But if it was that early, then I would agree with you. That I was like, man, this show got really stupid really fast. But yeah, I think I do try to give benefit of the doubt when stuff like that is just so dumb. And at this point, I guess it's just on me because it's like, why would I assume that anything's going to get better at this point? Like, I think we just have to accept that outside of a few specific writers, most things are just retarded. And like, you're not getting any kind of explanation. You're not getting anything. But what's funny is Reacher this season, not like on the same show, actually starts off with a thing that seems so out of character that you're like, oh, there must be something else going on. And there is. Like that gets explained halfway through the first episode. So I'm like, okay, you did a good enough job with the characters that I was able to pick up on it right away that something was amiss, right? So it's weird. It's weird that like within the same show, it's that much of a mixed bag already. Over the course of 3 seasons, when you're pulling from books and all that. Like an original IP, and you're kind of coming up with stuff and trying stuff, I totally get that sometimes they just miss. But to me, it sounds like with Reacher, they're just picking the books that they like the best and adapting them. Which, it's not like Reacher is some kind of a linear story or whatever, right? It's just kind of a journeyman. So I think it's a smart way to go about it, right? Is not to try to do the books in order. It's just to pick the ones that you like best and start off with that. Like, there's no reason to hold off on people's favorite stories when there's not a linear story to be told. Like, it's not like Game of Thrones, right? You can't adapt the second book without the first one. It's more like, I was going to say Seinfeld, but you know what I mean. What is it? What do they call it? I'm blanking on the fucking word. It's not serialized, but essentially where like episodic, I guess. Except obviously in this case, it's season long. It's not literally just episodes. But yeah. But so far, off to a good start. I've had a lot of fun with it. The first couple episodes. I will say, I think it's going to be a bit more of a slow burn. Episodic, yeah. Gonzalez got me. I do think it's going to be a bit more of a slow burn after that first scene because of the way the story is. I mean, obviously you've read the book already, but because he's undercover, you're not going to get a ton of crazy action set pieces and shit like that because he's trying to be sneaky. Of course, there's, a little bit of humor in the dude who's a fucking giant being the sneaky guy, but I think it works. Especially because he's a, clever character for his specialty. He's not just some big dumb oaf, right? But yeah. So it's off to a good start. I don't know if I'll do videos each week just because it's kind of a show that, unless it's really fucking up, there's not a ton to say about it, for me at least. I mean, maybe somebody with more insight, into military operations or the books and who can compare them or whatever would have more to say in that regard. Yeah, Gonzalez is kind of confirming what my guess was, that the book is a lot more about staying under the radar. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking too. Is I'm hoping it'll fall apart in the next couple episodes here, like his undercover shit, and we'll get a little bit more of the open violence and him versus Paulie and all that. Because if they save all that for the finale, it is going to be a very slow burn. And I can kind of see why they released 3 episodes at once. Because, even if it's a good story, when you have like your slower paced shows or your less action heavy shows or whatever you want to call it, unfortunately now, the audience needs like immediate stimulation all the time, or they'll just kind of check out. Like, I heard that House of the Dragon season 2 was actually pretty well written for the most part. I'm sure it had its own issues, but then because the season didn't end with the massive battle that it was leading to, people were fucking pissed. And to be fair, that's partially on the HBO and the writers. Like, the typical Game of Thrones formula was like, episode 8, 9-ish is the big battle episode. 10 is kind of wrapping up that story and setting up the next one. You might get a couple late in the game action scenes or betrayals or whatever. But to just cut it off before the battle, Mr. Divine says, thanks, TikTok. It's hard not to feel like that's the cause, right? Like social media in general. I'm glad you're here there, Mr. Divine. I wanted to ask you, did you tell me what your movie for February was? Or are you waiting to pick a longer show or something? Because normally I bookmark stuff, and I can't remember if you told me on stream and then I forgot to bookmark it to remind myself. And I didn't see anything in the comments from you when I looked through. On my end, I can search for people. Like, I can filter by members and subscribers and stuff. So I filtered by members because there's like 5 of you, and I didn't see you tell me what your February pick was, but I wanted to make sure it wasn't me forgetting. Okay. Well, that's no big deal. I mean, I joked on Discord with iStad that the memberships are going to start expiring, but that's only because I know him in real life and he's a bitch. So, yeah, if you want to save it, it's not a problem. I mean, some people like Tyler, he's used 2 for 1 month a couple times. Sorry, he's used 2 months worth for one show a couple times to get me to watch Deadwood. Bear the Dog did the same thing with Band of Brothers. So, because, I don't have like a hard and fast fucking rule. The general formula that I try to stick to is that it'd be nice if I could target this guy, is to limit it to like 1 anime core per month. So if you wanted to do a longer show that's like 10 hours, just use 2 months. Because I mean, obviously it's just a time limit thing. The example that I always use is I can't have someone using a member request for Supernatural because the Supernatural seasons are like 24 episodes that are 45 minutes each, which is like, shit, that would be my entire fucking month, So yeah, just let me know, and just make sure that I acknowledge it, because YouTube is funky sometimes about who it like lets me know commented. Like there's one guy who's been commenting on the channel for a while named Kaiju, and I don't know why a lot of his comments get filtered out. So I have to I just happen to see them manually because I figured out a little bit more how the YouTube studio shit works. So yeah, no rush. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't forgetting. That's all. Especially because today's the 23rd, so Friday is the end of the month. But yeah. Anyway, so yeah, Reacher this season. If you're into just the simple plot, fun, kind of cheesy dialogue, a big ass dude beating up bad guys and having sex with hot women, Reacher season 3 I would definitely recommend. Especially if you don't mind the week to week format. I know a lot of people like to wait and just binge. I try not to do that, partially because if I want to talk about stuff, I want to do it right away. And then also just because I'm impatient. And then there's, the whole just having to worry about spoilers thing. And I will say, as far as spoilers go, I think anime people might be the worst. Like every Facebook page that I follow or Reddit or whatever for anime, it'll be like the episode has been out. It feels like, 20 minutes. And people are already posting images and stills and shit. But yeah, as far as videos this week, I will. I don't know when I'll get them out. I'm hoping tomorrow for the 2 member requests from Jay and Istad, which were ga-rei-zero and the Macross movie. Beyond that, I don't know. I'll have to wait and see for Reacher if I want to do a video for that. And then yeah, outside of that, it's kind of just whatever I feel like right now because there's not a ton out. But I am looking forward to that Mickey 17 movie with Robert Pattinson. That at least looks unique. And I'm looking forward to Daredevil. And that is more of just praying that it's mediocre. I can't even hope for good at this point. Just not destroyed. But I'm going to wrap up here for today. I've been trying to keep the streams a little bit more tight and a little bit less rambly. Especially just because there's not that much coming out right now. So it's not like a ton of new shit to talk about. Let's see. As far as videos, I do have some fun ideas. Yes, Gonzalez, Do You Remember Love, the 84 one, is the one that Jay picked. He was very specific. And luckily I found the high-res 4K version on YouTube. I guess it's old enough to not have to worry about copyright, which is nice. I was trying to think of what else I may talk about besides the Mickey 17 movie. I don't know if there's really anything until we get more to like May. I mean, who knows? Maybe Netflix will sneakily have a good show or something come out that I can watch. But I don't really like to do the sort of disparu watching trash to talk about type thing. I mean, I do watch stuff that's bad just by happenstance, but in an ideal world, I'd be able to talk about good stuff mainly. Oh, okay. So Mr. Divine's going with Vertigo, Hitchcock again. All right, let me put that because I'm so tech savvy. that the way that I mark what I need to watch is by opening up a tab in my phone on Google Chrome, and then I just leave that tab open until I've watched it. Super complicated, I know. Damn, 93 on Rotten Tomatoes, huh? All right. Yeah, I will try to get to that before the end of the month. But I'm going to partially blame you for the late notice if it doesn't happen until next weekend. But either way, I'll watch it soon for sure. Yeah, and beyond that, I'm just working and kind of plugging along. Hopefully I should be able to stream again next weekend. I don't think I have any plans or anything. I do have quite a few visitors coming in town over the next like monthish, and obviously on those weekends it's pretty unlikely I'll be able to stream. Just I have my family in town. I can't really put off plans with them to hang out and talk to you guys. Well, I guess I could. I'd just be a fucking asshole. So I'm not gonna. No, more of an asshole. But okay, I'm gonna leave it here for today. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have fun at work this week. Hopefully, for those of you in cold places, it starts warming up. My family from Maryland has been bitching nonstop about the weather and the snow. Sucks for those scrubs. But it's been nice here in South Carolina, so doesn't impact me. All right. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.